on this episode of the National Parks Road Trip.
But I wanted to make this video here in Capitol Reef about taking time lapses. Oh yeah. Hell yeah. Oh man. Look at those light rays, guys. You gotta love it. Gotta love Utah.
After freezing our butts off in the cold altitude of Bryce Canyon, we were ready for a change of scenery. So after a quick orchestra nap after sunrise, we finally headed out towards Capitol Reef National Park. Now, if you remember what happened last year, we bailed on some pretty epic conditions at Chimney Rock in an attempt to off-road our van to the iconic Temple of the Sun and Moon, but we ended up almost getting our van stuck in a river. Epic fail on my part. But this year, I made sure to rent a 4x4 Jeep Grand Cherokee to ensure that the river wouldn't stop us this time. Although, there were some parts of this trip that did make me miss the van.
The luggage situation back here is...
That doesn't get worse when we have the same shit.
I know, it somehow got worse.
Should have rented an RV Cybertruck setup like this, but at least we were able to revisit our favorite food establishment here in the Capitol Reef area, Curry Pizza. After filling our tummies with tiki masala, we headed out towards Cathedral Valley to do some reconnaissance. The mistake we made in Bryce Canyon was shooting the Milky Way without scouting the area during the daytime. And because this was such an important location for us to get our redemption for last year, we didn't want to leave anything to chance.
Look at this view. This is absolutely incredible, guys. Welcome to Cathedral Valley, a part of Capitol Reef National Park. I wanted to make this video here in Capitol Reef about taking time lapses. And time lapses are one of my most favorite ways to capture movement across a landscape, whether it's the light painting the beautiful landscape across the hills or the Milky Way rising over an epic spire or something. Time lapse can be a great way to capture a whole entire shoot and condense it into one short little video. So today we're out here on this composition and we're looking at it probably more towards a sunrise composition. And the way that I like to kind of plan out my shots for time-lapse photography is to use an app called PhotoPills. PhotoPills essentially will provide you with an augmented reality of where the sun, where the moon, and where the Milky Way is going to be positioned so that you can line up that subject with wherever that light is coming from. So if we fire up PhotoPills here, we go to the sun module and tap augmented reality or AR at the bottom. You can see the sun will be rising off to our left, the sun will be rising off to our right, and it's going to be shining its light across the landscape like this. Hopefully, that's the idea. So if we want to change focal lengths here, 24 millimeters, we can see that hopefully the light will be cast across this entire scene during sunrise. So that's shot number one. We're gonna try and scout out a couple more compositions for Milky Way and just get ourselves more prepared for tonight and tomorrow morning. Wow, look at that. Anyways, this right here, guys, is probably going to be our Milky Way composition. We've got Temple of the Sun directly in front of us, and you can see even a little bit of Temple of the Moon towards the middle. But yeah, it's going to be super nice to get this with the Milky Way. Again, we're just primarily out here today scouting it out. But if we fire up PhotoPills once again here, and instead of going down to like the sun part, we'll go down to night augmented reality or night AR. And as you can see, if we fast forward time to maybe later on tonight, around midnight, the Milky Way is going to be rising up from the left side and gradually making its way across the sky throughout the night. So maybe about almost 4 o'clock is probably going to be the most optimal shot to get it right in between the two temples. And then by 5 o'clock, it's going to be blue hour already. But yeah, I'm just kind of pre-planning the movement of the time lapse, the Milky Way time lapse for tonight. We're probably gonna get here maybe around 2, 3 a.m. and have this camera set up probably horizontally, and then gradually have that Milky Way move across the sky until around blue hour-ish, or whenever we decide to move. But that'll give us some nice movement when taking time lapse. And regardless, for all time lapses, whether or not you're pre-planning it like we are today, or if you're walking up to a location and finding something to shoot, you want to always try to look for this one thing, and that one thing is movement. That could be movement of the stars like we are doing here, it could be movement of the light, it could be movement of the clouds, it could be so many different things. But you really just want to be looking for movement, because once you have that movement, then that's going to determine whether or not your time lapse is going to be interesting, or if it's just going to look like a static image of multiple frames of nothingness. So the movement that we're going for with the sunrise shot earlier is the sun illuminating the landscape, and the movement that we're looking for here is the Milky Way across the sky. But yeah, it's a good stuff here. I think we scouted this place out pretty well. We know exactly where we need to go for the most optimal shots. We're gonna check into our motel, maybe shoot sunset. We'll go over how to take a time lapse with that sunset, call it an early night, eat dinner, rest, and get back out here super duper early in the morning. But yeah, stoked for this. Hopefully we get clear skies tonight.
After fueling up for the evening at Hollow Mountain, a super cool convenience store located inside of a mountain, we checked into our motel and then headed out to Factory Butte to catch sunset.
All right guys, welcome to Factory Butte. We are out here today just doing a little bit of scouting. This isn't really a sunset shot, but we're still trying to get it regardless. There's like nothing. We had to off-road to get to this location, and it almost killed us like 2-3 times. We've just got little cracks in the mud leading up to the butte, and I've got the drone up in the air. It's a little bit windy, so I'm just trying to see if this drone can indeed handle the wind. And if it can, then I'm gonna try and fly it around Factory Butte and get that light across the landscape, which I think it's handling pretty well. So let's give it a shot. Let's see what we can do here. But the textures on the landscape are just absolutely incredible. We've got light on these veins that come off of Factory Butte and just light up in the sunlight.
This location wasn't the best place to start my tutorial in time-lapsing. If anything, this is an example of a bad time-lapse because there really isn't very much movement in these two time-lapses, just the sun setting behind the butte. I did, however, like the drone footage that we got with the last of the afternoon light painting this epic landscape. After getting approximately -4 hours of sleep, we headed out into the dark of night back to the Temple of the Sun and Moon for our redemption mission.
Alright guys, welcome back to the Temple of the Sun and Moon here in Capitol Reef National Park. Today, or tonight, this morning, we are out here shooting Milky Way. It's a beautiful, beautiful clear sky night. So what I think I'm gonna do here is set up our first Milky Way time lapse before we go chase some other comps right now. I just took a quick shot here. As you can see, the Milky Way is pretty far out towards our left, but gradually throughout the night, as I scouted it out here during the daytime, the Milky Way is gonna rise and shift more towards the right, more towards the big towering Temple of the Sun. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna walk you guys through the settings that I'm going to be using for my time lapse, and hopefully it can help you capture your own Milky Way time lapse of your own. And I went over capturing the Milky Way in stills images in my last video at Bryce Canyon, so if you haven't watched that video, check that one out before you watch this one, because because that video will give you the basic understanding of how to capture the Milky Way with still images. And this one, we're just combining still images to create a time lapse. If we just look at our composition here with bright monitoring, we've got, of course, the Temple of the Sun on the right, and a little bit further off to the left, which is a smaller one, is the Temple of the Moon, and we've got the Milky Way core rising off to the left side. Now, settings-wise, you can see I've got things dialed in pretty much already. We're gonna use a 6-second exposure to capture the Milky Way. Actually, I think we could probably even dial it up to maybe about 8 seconds to try and let in as much light as we possibly can. What else? We got f1.8, of course. We've got the lens opened up to its widest, and then ISO 6400. It's pretty high ISO, but I'm okay with it because it allows me to capture a lot of the frames with that 8-second exposure and just bring up a lot of shadow detail in the time lapse. We're gonna start the time lapse, essentially do this here. Hang on, we'll go into menu, and then it's in under the first menu, the shooting menu. Shooting, it's under drive mode here, interval shooting function, interval shooting on. And what I have here is I set my shooting start time at 1 second, but it's gonna shoot right away. Shooting interval I set to 1 second. And the reason for that is I want to make sure that as soon as I take, that 8-second exposure is done, I want the camera to take another one right away. There isn't a lot of time to allow the Milky Way to fully move across the sky. We really want to keep things as consistent and as frequent as possible with our intervals to make sure we really capture all of that motion, because the stars move ever so slightly even after 8 seconds. So we don't want any delay between our frames if we want to get the smoothest time lapse as possible. And then, as you saw, number of shots I just set to 999. That means until I walk over here and stop the time lapse, the camera will just keep taking those shots over and over and over again. So we're gonna commit to this here, put the LCD back, set the time lapse going, and boom, we are off and shooting the Milky Way time lapse of the night. And then we're gonna head back up a little bit further this way to see if we can capture some single exposures. All right, so according to Darwin, Lemmy, and Garrett, the core is a little too low to shoot with Temple of the Sun. So we're gonna actually drive just a little bit further to Temple of the Moon and try and see if we can get a shot of it low with that spire, and then make our way back over here as the Milky Way rises. I left the time lapse out there, but I flipped the screen horizontal, so that way, at least if I look back towards this direction, then we'll be able to see the time lapse snapping its pictures away. But you may see some little white dots and red dots hopping around the time lapse, because that's going to be us trying to get our photos. But yeah, that's just something you have to deal with when taking time lapses. You can't control, where you're going to be stepping and all that kind of stuff, especially if you're shooting with other photographers, which is always a good idea when shooting astrophotography in the middle of the night. So yeah, hopefully we can get something good from Temple of the Moon. Because the core is so low on the horizon, I think I'm going to start off shooting with the 20mm, or the 24mm, I'm sorry. And then when the core gets higher, probably switch to the 20mm just to get a little bit more wider view. Oh, yep. That's real nice.
You gotta go closer, man. It looks like it.
Oh yeah, you're shooting at 14mm, yeah, that's right. You can go closer. I think I'm good. That's fine, I can Photoshop you out. All right, so as you can hear from the conversation, they're gonna head a little bit closer, but because I'm shooting with a little bit more telephoto, I'm gonna be hanging out back here. But yeah, it looks really awesome. Look at how they're shining their light on the rock. It just looks so cool. Maybe a few minutes or so for the Milky Way core to rise up a little bit more. But in the meantime, while we wait, what we can do is do a time lapse with this camera. There's gonna be lights from all of them lighting up the rock and all that stuff, working their cameras and all that, but I think it'll be fine. We're just gonna go back to our regular settings here. 6 seconds, f1.4, ISO 6400. Let me just take a quick test shot here, make sure we're all working properly. Whew, it's looking real nice right now. Oh my God, that's beautiful. Very, very, very beautiful. Primarily the focus of this time lapse is to capture the movement of the Milky Way core just rising from, it's kind of slanted more this way, but we want it to rise up just to about there. I would say is probably optimal for this shot. So this time lapse is going to be capturing everything up close, as well as all the little bit of itty bitty lights down there of all my friends walking and lighting up the spires and all that kind of stuff. So that might actually look quite cool. Okay, I think I have another idea that we can do to pass the time here. So this is the Temple of the Sun. Our time lapse is on the other side. Hopefully it's still there, but you can see the Milky Way core arching, or not the core, but the Milky Way arching up above, and then gradually making its way over towards this side. And then towards this side is Temple of the Moon. We probably could take a nice panorama, and panoramas for Milky Way usually work best when the Milky Way core is nice and low on the horizon like it is now. So yeah, let's give that a shot. See if we can get a nice panorama here with just the A7 S3, 12 megapixels, you know, but 20 millimeters, it's not a bad focal length by any means for panorama photography. So yeah, let's see if we can get that done.
If you are interested in learning how I post-process this image, then check out my advanced Milky Way editing tutorial on my website. There will be a link in the description below. Oh yeah, when this thing aligns, this is going to be an epic shot right here. Let me just step to the side here. You can kind of make out our foreground. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to wait for the Milky Way core to just rise slightly above. But for now, you know what we're going to do? This is the theme of this video here, is take a time lapse. Focused, primarily on just watching that Milky Way core rise. And once the bottom of that core finally clears the top of the spire, we'll do a panorama with our main camera over here. Quality stuff right here, guys. This thing is literally like Jurassic World kind stuff. So met up with the rest of the crew. We're just grabbing a shot just at the base of Temple of the Moon. Then we're gonna head back towards Temple of the Sun after this. Yeah, grabbed a quick pano, switched to the 20 mil. Of course, now I'm vlogging with the 24 millimeters, so things are gonna be a little bit tighter, but we'll see you guys at Temple of the Sun that way. Oh man, made it just in time to Temple of the Sun. Time lapse is still going. We have a solid 50% battery life still on the camera. And this place is looking absolutely incredible right now. I think it's about to line up almost perfectly. Oh man, we are still really close to Temple of the Sun, as you can see with this 24 millimeter frame that we're filming on right now. But yeah, we're just hanging out back here a little bit, taking a couple of test shots. But yeah, just gonna give it a couple minutes for this Milky Way core to rise up a little bit more over the peak, and then we're gonna grab this shot. And kind of as this is happening, the core is gonna gradually get higher and higher, and then we'll make our way running back over towards the other side and finally grab the shot that the time lapse is working on, except with a higher resolution, better quality camera.
Okay, this might just be the final composition of this incredible, incredible evening for sure. That Milky Way core is pretty high. Oh yeah. Hell yeah. What an epic morning here at the Temple of the Sun and Moon. I'm so tired that I totally forgot that what the plan is to shoot sunrise here, but a little bit further back with those rocks on the other side. So stay tuned for that. We'll go over how to time-lapse a sunrise, shooting almost directly into the sun, but yeah, it's gonna be fun. Good morning, everybody. Us crackheads here are back at it again for sunrise here. Today, we're primarily shooting telephoto. I've got the 2270 millimeter lens on here, and I think that's gonna work perfect for our composition here. We've got these 3 spires out here. We've got 2 spires perfectly framing Temple of the Moon. So last night I shot pretty much all my time lapses using manual mode. And you know, it's fairly, in some ways it's fairly easy to take Milky Way time lapse because the lighting doesn't exactly shift as much as it will this morning when the light is changing from like super dark like this to super bright when the sun does come out. So in order to capture that movement of light, our camera needs to adjust for that changing light essentially. So there's a couple of ways that we can do that. The usual way I like to capture that change in light is to set the camera into aperture priority. Now, I'm gonna wanna set my aperture for this particular shot to something like f/16. And what f/16 is gonna do, it's gonna close down our aperture so that we maximize the amount of depth of field in our frame. Pretty much gonna set our ISO to auto ISO, and then our shutter speed is pretty much just whatever. We don't have a whole lot of moving elements in our frame, so we don't have to worry too much about, you know, moving water or trees or whatever. So our shutter speed can just be whatever we want it to be. Basically, because we're in an automatic setting, our camera needs to meter for a particular subject, if you will. Now you can meter in a variety of different ways, but what I usually like to meter with is highlights, because when shooting with digital cameras, it's really important that we capture highlight detail, because if we blow out your highlights, then we lose that highlight detail. We can't recover it. Now, as you can see, this shot is very silhouette, but if we were to bring up the shadows in post, we could recover a fair amount of detail with that. So we always want to be exposing for our highlights, especially when shooting a time lapse. And then, yeah, pretty much as the light changes here, the camera will adjust the shutter speed and maybe a little bit of the ISO to compensate for the amount of light. So as the scene gets brighter, our shutter speed will come down and get faster and faster, and then hopefully we'll end up with a nice smooth transition. And I think for this one, I think I'm gonna set my intervals to around 2 seconds. So yeah, I get this question a lot when it comes to intervals, because intervals can be a little complicated for the first time time-lapse user, I guess. So the intervals is basically how often your camera is going to fire to take a shot. So right now, I have my interval set to 2 seconds, so it's gonna take a shot every 2 seconds. You don't wanna just shoot your intervals at 1 second every time to capture every single second of a sunrise. Usually my sweet spot is anywhere from like 2 seconds to 4 seconds during the daytime. And that's to make sure that we capture enough movement in the frame that if something crazy were to happen with the light in a split second, we would have enough frames to capture that and slow it down in our time lapse. A lot of people like to shoot their intervals like every 5 seconds to 10 seconds. And for me personally, I feel like that's a little too long because something can happen between those 5 and 10 seconds. So I always try to get as long of a time lapse as I can by making my intervals as short as possible, if that makes sense. So you can always take a longer time lapse and condense it shorter and make it more, I guess, digestible for the viewer. But if you decide to choose longer intervals, you can't take a shorter time lapse and stretch it out to make it longer. Time lapses are great because you can kind of just set up your main composition one time, set it and forget it, and just relax and just enjoy the scene that's in front of you. It really makes photographers lazy in some ways. Like sometimes I feel like I'm too busy focusing on getting a time lapse instead of actually trying to work a solid composition. But when you've strained yourself all night, I think it's a reasonable excuse to relax a little bit and just enjoy the sunrise. Let's see, what other time-lapse tips can I give you guys? It's always still a good idea to lock your cameras into manual focus mode. That way, if you stop your time-lapse for some reason and you push the button and the camera refocuses, sometimes that focus can miss and then mess up your time-lapse. The main thing that I want you guys to take home when taking a time-lapse is there has to be a purpose for taking a time-lapse. You have to want to capture the movement of something in nature. And it could be movement of the clouds, could be movement of the light, could be movement of the Milky Way, but just always keep that in mind. A bad time-lapse is a time-lapse that doesn't have any movement, where you're just taking shots during midday crystal clear skies and it's just boom, it looks the same, but you might as well just take a single exposure and just extend it across however duration of the video. It's pretty much that. Yeah, you really need to have that dynamic movement to really create good time lapses. So remember that when you're going out to shoot and capture your own time lapses.
After sunrise, we were all dead tired. I believe I was able to fall asleep even on the bumpy off-roading drive back to the motel. This barbecue was definitely needed as a pick-me-up meal. We hit up Factory Butte once again and got some epic drone footage of us off-roading with the Jeep and the drone. Out to Moonscape Overlook just in time for sunset, but by then the clouds had rolled in and socked out all the light. But after seeing this landscape, I knew I had to try and come back the following morning for sunrise.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to a Moody sunrise here at Moonscape Overlook. And of course, being the amazingly stupid photographer that I am, I have to pick the most precarious cliff to set up my gear for sunrise. I'm not gonna lie, it looks like there's some pretty decent light that's about to happen on the horizon. Oh, there goes the best of the light. I think that just that little bit of blush is pretty much all we're going to get. Good thing we were able to just grab a quick time lapse with the 100 to 400 real quick. But what I was going to try and do is, if the light got better and better, is try and get a shot of the light just on this side over here. But I don't think we're going to get that. Probably give this scene maybe like 30 minutes or so, just to see if the sun breaking the cloud line is going to make a little bit of a difference. There's a little bit of color coming out just from that faint little glow from the sun. The light is definitely coming out right now. Look at that. Look at that landscape. It's starting to glow a little bit. Oh, I thought it was gonna be an epic fail, but no. We've got some good stuff happening right now. Oh man, look at those light rays, guys. You gotta love it. Gotta love Utah. It wasn't all for nothing. I thought this was gonna be a bad time lapse, but it wasn't all for nothing. But yeah, hopefully you guys got a couple of good tips from this vlog, you know, on what to look for in order to capture your time lapses. Again, the key point is looking for movement out in the landscape, whether that's movement with the clouds, light, Milky Way, whatever. Always look for that movement to capture, you know, the best time lapse possible. And then hopefully you also got a couple of tips on, you know, technically shooting your time lapse, from settings like aperture priority mode to, you know, intervals between like 1 second intervals to 5 second intervals and all that kind of stuff. Hopefully that information was helpful. But yeah, we're gonna let these time lapses roll out. But yeah, after this, we are going to pack up all of our stuff and head over to our final destination, which is Moab. We've got a couple of new locations to explore up there, and hopefully we'll be able to get at least one more clear night of Milky Way to chase the shot that we missed last time. This whole point of this trip is to just get revenge on the locations that didn't give us good weather. But yeah, beautiful stuff here this morning. Stay tuned for the next travel video.
I thought that after the light faded that it would be gone for the rest of the morning, but on my drive out of the Badlands, the sky opened up once again, so you know I had to step out, set up a couple time lapses, and put the drone up. Coming up next week on the National Parks Road Trip.
Good.